To kick off our conversation about metrics and measurement, it might make sense to call out the litany of quotes related to measurement that you may have heard, and why you might not want to take these quotes as gospel. Let's start with my man, Edwards Deming. Have you ever heard the quote, "You can't manage what you don't measure"? Well, if you do a Google search, you'll find dozens of images and quotes just like this. As you can see, this says you can't manage what you don't measure, and it's attributed to Deming. It's a bit like a game of telephone where the message gets a little distorted each time it's relayed. Now, if you actually did a Google search for that quote, you'd see it's also attributed to the famous management consultant, Peter Drucker. This one says, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Okay, the wording between these quotes is slightly different, but essentially the same. Did they both say it? Nope. Neither of them did. Both had extremely nuanced and thoughtful approaches to measurement that take into account the mission, vision, and values of the organization, along with strategic priorities. But more importantly, we need to carefully consider the people within the organization. Does your process of measurement build the culture we desire? Can we use thoughtful measurement to create a learning organization? Yes, you absolutely can. But to do this, we need to be very thoughtful about what we're measuring, which is why this lecture is on meaningful metrics. If we do a bit of digging and look back to the teachings and writings of both of these influential men, we'll see that they did have strikingly similar views on measurement. But again, it's complicated, and we shouldn't be so quick to simplify our thoughts on performance metrics to an incorrectly attributed quote that's essentially telling you to measure everything. Do not measure everything. What Drucker did say in his book on management, tasks, responsibilities, practices is this. Work implies not only that somebody is supposed to do the job, but also accountability, a deadline, and finally, the measurement of results. That is, feedback from the results on the work in the planning process itself. But for all that, Drucker also knew that not everything could be held to the standard. In an interview, he said, "Your first role is the personal one. It's the relationship with people, the development of mutual confidence, the identification of people, the creation of a community. This is something only you can do." He went on, "It cannot be measured or easily defined. But it's not only a key function, it's the only one you can perform." So let's think about this a little bit more. He's an advocate for measurement as a rigorous practice for us to determine if what we are trying to do is actually getting done. But we can't measure everything that's important, and the most important role we have as leaders is to lead, inspire, support, and foster a culture that is committed to learning and growth of both the organization and its people. Paul Zak from the Drucker Institute notes that when it comes to people, not everything that goes into being effective can be captured by some kind of metric. Not enthusiasm, not alignment with the organization's mission, not the willingness to go above and beyond. So true, a 360-degree review might pick up on some of these qualities, but often poorly. This is why Drucker believed that conversations with colleagues are essential. The science backs this up too. Expansive conversations and socializing can induce the brain to synthesize oxytocin, which is the social engagement molecule. When the brain releases oxytocin, we are motivated and internally rewarded to cooperate with others for a common purpose. We'll come back to this when we talk about data visualization to create a shared understanding. So what did Deming actually say? Well, what he said was, it's wrong to suppose that if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. A costly myth. It's on page 35 of his book, The New Economics, and is the age-old story of taken out of context. But how does that jive with his background as a statistician? We also know that Deming was a proponent of statistical quality control. So how should we be thinking about metrics and measurement? The point is that we should strive to focus on meaningful metrics, and sometimes the thing we want to measure isn't easily measured. Take customer satisfaction. We can use surveys and metrics to create repeat business, social media tweets, and personal recommendations to help us understand customer satisfaction. But how do we truly know how the customer feels? What works well and what can be improved? Under what scenarios does the product or service not live up to expectations? Measurement here can be tricky, and we need to be careful not to simplify the customer experience to what a handful of users say on a form that we designed. Do we know that our questions and phrasing of the survey are getting at the heart of our question? How about organizational culture? How about health or quality of life? How can we measure the quality of our new hires? Now, there are some that say that the hard stuff can't be measured. Again, more memes for people to take as gospel, but that's not right either. This is leadership. It's an art and a science, and we need to use our intuition and humanness to guide some of these more challenging opportunities within the organization, just as much as we need data for the easily quantifiable aspects of our work. We need to stay open to the fact that there are different levels of measurement, and we need to experiment with finding measures that work for us, just as much as we need to experiment with improving our processes, products, and services. So now that we've got some of those misconceptions out of the way, what does this mean for how we determine our KPIs? KPIs refer to key performance indicators. These are quantifiable measures of performance related to a specific objective. Not every KPI measures the overall performance of a business, though. Larger corporations may have multiple KPIs for every department or segment of the business. Key indicators differ based on the business. A distributor's KPIs will differ from a manufacturer's, and so on. Even like companies can have varied KPIs, as not every business shares the same goals. Any sizable organization is sure to have a laundry list of KPIs, but we often see that small to mid-sized businesses don't utilize KPIs to the same extent. If you're self-employed or running your own firm, then who's to tell you what your KPIs are? Are you letting your business run you, or are you running your business? Focus on a few simple KPIs to create a common goal for your firm. Your employees can adopt a common language and easily understand the priorities, which should always be in alignment with your overarching purpose and strategic objectives. Which gets me to my main point. Don't measure everything. While smaller organizations often have an opportunity to be more explicit and rigorous about measuring the things that matter for growth and improvement, larger corporations often have the opposite problem. They're drowning in metrics. There needs to be balance to ensure that the metrics we're taking the time to collect, analyze, display, and review regularly are worth that effort. Are they moving? Are they aligned with your purpose and strategic objectives? Let's walk through a few of the different key differences between good KPIs and vanity metrics, or metrics we collect for less than valid reasons. Good KPIs are strategic in what we refer to as SMART goals, which are specific, measurable, actionable, and achievable, relevant, and time-based. They're clearly defined and actively aid in decision-making. To do this, we typically want to express these metrics as percentages, averages, or ratios, so we can make apples-to-apples comparisons over time, as our denominator, parts produced, patients seen, shots made, may change over time. We should only have a select few that show performance over time, and these should be clearly tied to organizational goals that help you understand where you need to focus your attention. Take a look at your organization's KPIs and evaluate them against this list. How do you fare? Are these SMART goals? Recall that SMART goals are, again, specific, measurable, actionable, and achievable, relevant, and time-based. I would pay particular attention to the A, attainable or actionable, and T, time-based. Too often we track the same high-level metrics that never seem to budge, and we don't have any clear target by which to achieve our goal. Yet we report out on them at every meeting. We get excited when we see slight movement in the right direction and take it as a personal attack when we see them slide. We'll come back to this later in statistical process control to help guide us out of this cycle. Give your KPIs a critical review. Try focusing on only a handful of metrics that truly influence the success of our business and can actually improve with the right level of attention. These metrics should be associated with a problem. In Lean, we define a problem as being a gap between our current performance and our desired performance. And we can think about this in two ways. You can have a gap between your current performance and your target performance. This is what we refer to as a caused gap. But we can also have a problem or gap when we've achieved a target already and are wanting to raise the bar. We refer to this as a created gap. Be sure you know which one you have. We also want to make sure that we have a balanced set of metrics. Some organizations have goals related to profit, efficiency, cost, productivity, and speed. But that's not a particularly balanced set of metrics. In Lean, you'll often hear the letters SQDCM, or you'll see them on bulletin boards across the facility. This stands for safety, quality, delivery, which relates to getting the customer what they want when they want it, cost, and morale. This forces many organizations to ensure that they are actively evaluating a broad range of goals at both the organization and department level. Again, one of the most important aspects of identifying KPIs and measurement is making sure they align with your vision and strategic goals. Don't feel obligated to use SQDCM. Instead, use it as a guide to check in on the breadth of metrics you're focused on and how they align with your underlying purpose and shared vision for the future. While we may have KPIs at both the organization and department level, it's also very important to differentiate the types of metrics you deem important. Too often, we see large organizations with pure outcome metrics listed on executive dashboards. We kill ourselves in trying to move the needle on these things, never really realizing that we need to break those important outcome metrics into smaller process metrics that measure how the process is working. That will positively influence those higher level outcome metrics. This is often where we see a disconnect between executive dashboards and frontline operations. Yet they need to be aligned, and you can do this by clearly tying your outcome metrics to your process metrics. But we aren't done. We also need to be mindful of balance measures. These are metrics that make sure an improvement in one area doesn't negatively impact another. Donald Berwick is a Harvard professor, founder of the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, and the former administrator for the Centers of Medicaid and Medicare. He is famously and accurately quoted as saying that all improvement requires change, but not all change results in an improvement. The key to identifying beneficial change is measurement. More often than not, our outcome metrics and organizational KPIs are what we call lagging indicators. A lagging indicator assesses the current state of the business and is typically compiled using historical data over the past few days, weeks, or months. A leading indicator, on the other hand, is intended to predict future conditions, can be captured in real time, and helps teams to understand how to produce the desired results. Let's go through an example together. One of your KPIs might have to do with improving engineering on-time delivery in the next 6 months. We might measure this by the number of projects delivered on time divided by the total number of projects delivered. Since this is looking at the number of projects delivered over a 6-month window, we know this is a lagging indicator. We won't really assess our performance until the end. To help us make progress toward this goal, though, we might want to focus on process metrics related to the reduction of standing meeting time so teams can be sure they have enough dedicated time to work on the project. We'll get back to this when we talk about agile project management approaches. This might help us better understand whether competing priorities are hindering our on-time deliveries. Maybe you and your team work to increase dedicated project time by 20% and are tracking dedicated work time by team on a daily basis, which would make this a leading indicator. But you find that this hasn't had the predicted impact. Instead, you see a drop in the number of projects that are simultaneously being worked on, which we would consider our balance measure. So what do we do next? We'll leverage the growth mindset. We document our learning and keep going. This time, you decide to go and talk to each engineering team to better understand their biggest obstacles and to get a better handle of where the constraints lie. Maybe you find that there are long delays in handoffs. The teams are butting heads because there seems to be a breakdown in communication. This time around, you focus on the time between project milestones, or the time from when one functional deliverable is complete to the time the build is picked up by the next team. You decide to employ the agile project management approach to help support this new way of managing multidisciplinary teams and review these process times at daily huddles. Again, this would be considered a leading indicator because we're hypothesizing that it will positively influence our lagging outcome metric of % engineering on-time delivery. After tracking this for 60 days, you start to see significant and sustained improvements in both your process and outcome metric, while ensuring that the balance metric hasn't changed. Based on what you've learned, what is your next step? Remember to keep the PDCA cycle of continuous improvement going, leveraging your learning and successful use of outcome, process, and balance measures to move the organization forward. During this process, we want to always take the temperature of the team and make sure that everyone is equally invested in the forward progression of KPIs, and understand how those KPIs tie directly to strategic opportunities for the organization. This is the secret sauce of Toyota, and it's how you build a learning organization.